It's wonderful to be with you. I am so excited that Project Inside Out has brought us together today as a community to really upgrade our emotional intelligence, which is the missing link to consciously confronting our ecological reality and being more effective environmental leaders. And I'd like to discuss why this is so important at this time. The emotional journey of waking up to our climate and biodiversity crisis can, as we know, be very intense and extremely painful. We often call the ramifications of this the catch-all term eco-anxiety, and figure that our emotional responses to feeling the earth right now are all slightly different variations on this same anxious theme. But when we look at how our awareness manifests, we see that there are myriad emotional reactions that people are already putting into play, such as the Californians who are looking to move right now to a less fire-prone part of the country, the rich families that are snapping up foreign bug-out zones or bunkers, the people on Twitter who call Greta Thunberg crazy and mentally ill, the parents worried about how to prepare their children for the years ahead, or the prospective ones that are questioning whether to have kids at all. Also, the people working in insurance, like my father, who must emotionally self-regulate when their clients angrily scream, as they increasingly are, about their policy prices going up because the climate crisis is throwing the entire industry into disarray. And then, of course, there's the growing moral outrage, the boiling anger at the injustice of it all. The philosopher Glenn Albrecht came up with a word for emotions that are related to perceived or felt states of the earth, and he calls them psychoterratic emotions. In his book, Earth Emotions, he writes that as the damages ramp up due to economic systems that value profit over life, that the truth about fiscal irrationality and the insanity of deliberate climate warming will shock all the generations, and that they'll enter all forms of negative psychoterratic states, that these will then shake the foundations of human identity to its foundational core. And I believe that our species has entered this period. We're in the early days of it becoming mainstream that people realize this. However, those living in close connection to the land, like Indigenous peoples and farmers, or frontline communities living near toxic waste sites, have been experiencing their environments degrade for a very long time and sharing stories of deep emotional distress. Meanwhile, those working at the cutting edge of environmental issues, like climate scientists and activists and environmental writers like me, have also reported the emotional toll of our work for years. So really, this heaviness is nothing new, but what is how much more widespread it is becoming. And a statistic that nicely illustrates this is that in 2019, Oxford Languages reported a 4,290% increase in the use of the term eco-anxiety compared to the year before. For more than 40 years, we've limited the way we deal with this crisis to scientific fact, political argument, and technological ambition. But in all of those decades, things have only gotten worse. And it's now absolutely critical that we create new norms for sustainability leadership, which means centering the idea that we must also address this crisis at the level through which it was created: human behavior and our psychology. The knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, why should we turn inwards now to process our emotions when what we actually require is societal change? But that is a false binary. When people apply emotional intelligence to our own internal worlds, we can more effectively come together with others and be part of pushing for the collective transformations that we need. That's because emotional intelligence refers to the ability to identify and manage one's own emotions, as well as the emotions of others. And we can understand the stakes when we look at where this is missing, such as the political arena, where we find ourselves in a moment of unprecedented polarization and digital tribalism. Emotions are the gas that you can't smell or see, but they're fueling the public circus that allows big tech to cash in. There are active incentives against us handling our emotions well. We can see clearly how our lack of emotional intelligence here is pulling at the phrase of our democracies and our families. And the thing is that even though we hardly talk about this, our lack of emotional intelligence is just as damaging when it comes to how we relate to the earth. In order to heal from environmental breakdown and injustice, emotional intelligence can help us find compassion and understanding and acceptance and the ability to offer reparations from which forgiveness and true partnership can be achieved. And that's the ultimate goal here, right? Since mutually beneficial partnership with each other and other species and the planet is what we absolutely require. This is what we will need to collaborate on together in order to extend the time that humanity has on this planet and make it worth sticking around for. To be good partners, we must stay with the trouble, as the scholar Donna Haraway says, even when it's much easier to look away because the feelings that come with facing the truth of our reality are so intense. And we know they include things like anxiety, grief, shame, guilt, depression, fear, worry, cynicism, pessimism, hopelessness, helplessness, overwhelm, the feeling of being caught in a double bind. These are all signatures of our ecological crisis. But so are feelings of radical hope and excitement and aspiration and justice, solidarity, creativity, purpose, and meaning. And our job is to feel all of them and to allow them to transform us. Crucially, we need to find a balance, though, in this matrix of feeling. You know, the sweet spot where we're not just intellectually engaged with the crisis, but we're also emotionally engaged with it. And where we're familiar with how to integrate dark emotions into our life so that when they appear, we don't fall apart. Where we're in touch with our care for the world instead of numbed by our unconscious defenses. And where we're able to aspire for something more and see ourselves as being able to make a difference and know that it matters even if it is small. All of this requires a really high degree of emotional intelligence, and we have to practice it. And we need support in order to do this because it is not innate to all of us. What's much more often innate is becoming stressed, rigid, shutting down, projecting blame onto others, and being defensive. All the things that are common in strongman politics, but will not allow us to get through this mess while upholding the integrity of each and every human life, species, or wild place. We need tools and resources like what Project Inside Out has assembled in order to help us navigate the mess and complexity that comes with being alive at this time. This is a process of emotional activism. Environmental leaders have been ignoring the full spectrum of emotions that come with this work for far too long. And I can remember when I first realized this. It was 2011. I was at an environmental film festival in Toronto, and I was watching filmmakers pitch their documentaries to potential funders. We watched a moving trailer of a documentary about orangutans in Borneo that were being wiped out from deforestation. It was appalling, and the filmmakers captured that drama. And when it came time for the potential funders to respond, the director of one of Canada's largest environmental foundations spoke first to say that they would not touch the film with a 10-foot pole because it told a terribly sad story. He advised the filmmakers to rework the narrative so that it felt hopeful and then to give him a call. At the time, I was an aspiring media producer, and I remember feeling incredibly disappointed. One of the most influential environmental foundations in the country wanted to make the film less painful to watch by pretending that the orangutan's struggle seemed more solvable than it was. They needed it to end on a note that would send a positive affect vibrating through the bodies of the human viewers as they walked out of the theater. And of course, they'd want to see a good return on their investment, and I suppose that's part of what they're looking out for, but I thought, doesn't that need to be squared with the reality of the stories that they're in the business of popularizing? And to get their support, the filmmakers would need to wrap their story up in a bow, serving a human viewer's psychic comfort over an undeniably grim non-human reality. And I remember the disturbing feeling of realizing that this requisite, that cares more about how smoothly the story goes down than creating new norms for processing vulnerability, both the animals and our own, had likely been behind many environmental productions that I'd already seen. Now, Project Inside Out has a name for this kind of attempt at activating change, and they call it cheerleading. The cheerleader's strict commitment to hope and optimism without allowing any messy feelings to get center stage can feel incomplete and, as a result, inauthentic. Of course, the urge to focus on hope and positive messaging while ignoring what is stress-inducing is understandable. Cognitive psychology certainly backs up the idea that our brains over-respond to perceived losses over gains, and so negative information should always be balanced with inspiring and nourishing news. But avoiding the shadows of our reality at all costs misses a rich opportunity for environmental storytelling to make people feel seen and their emotions legitimized, and their role in all of this is something that they can summon. Pitting hope against fear wrongly suggests that they aren't equally important in this movement, as well as every emotion between them. Conversations about climate disruption can become fraught with disagreement and resentment, and we must carefully consider how we get into them and sustain them with compassion and respect for people's experiences and multiple, often differing truths. As Stephen taught us yesterday about motivational interviewing, by talking about both sides of the dilemma that so many of us feel caught in, our capacities for action can be freed up, though we've not generally seen that sensitive approach by environmental campaigns. For decades, we've thrown more facts and figures at the public and to try and scare them into action and then gotten mad when nothing happens. We do this even though science communication researchers have shown us time and again that when experts deliver information onto the public as though they are just sponges that will soak it up, it does not work. People process information through their own worldviews, values, and desires, which is why conservatives and liberals can look at the exact same data sets and go away believing completely separate things about them. Now, another common approach is to present a moral high ground, shaming those whose behaviors we consider bad. But this only attacks people's identities and raises their defenses. Something far more delicate is going on when we talk about this crisis, and we're not often conscious of it. The moment demands that we honor this by developing an emotionally intelligent approach. And I'm so grateful and excited that Project Inside Out is doing the groundwork to clear this path for us so explicitly. It's incumbent upon us as individuals to upgrade our emotional intelligence inside of a culture that values corporate greed over compassion and has not yet developed these skills. The trick here is that many of us individuals doing this work are tied to organizations, and we can inspire others in our organizations to apply emotionally intelligent tools. Organizations have influence. They make things happen on the world. They push on societal levers, and they help create new norms. So when we connect the dots like this, we can then understand and see the fractal connection that goes from the personal to the organizational, to the political, to the transformational. And then we can understand why this work truly is inside out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Britt. I love that final phrase. It's so beautiful. The fractal, what did you say?
The fractal connection, which actually I was inspired by the work of Adrienne Marie Brown to talk about fractals. She really argues that what we need now are small actions, the kinds of actions that most people say, oh, it'll never make a difference. We're in a moment of too much overwhelm. None of this is going to matter. But she really points out how the small things grow to another layer up the valence hierarchy of impact, and they diffract through the system. So what we're in is the business of fractal change.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We're living through that experience. So when we hear people talk about the individual versus the system,
yeah,
that's no longer going to be a way that we're thinking and talking about it, you know, and I think we're living through that right now. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.